Right, we'll go off to Inglisbridge, was it? You were saying? Over to you then. But if you try and turn it, we try and get people to talk in full sentences, so that if we actually ask something, include the question back in your answer. So it makes a full sentence out of it, but you'll see what we mean. We'll pick up on it as we can. But
you'll be asking the questions, won't you?
Yep. We'll all might ask, giving when we can.
Okay.
Yep.
As young girls, of about 13, I would imagine at that time, we used to get our bicycles out and decide we were going to cycle to the coast. Now, we knew we weren't allowed to cycle to the coast because you were only allowed within so many miles. But it was a great thrill for us to ride as far as Ingworth Bridges and to be turned back by the soldiers. I'm sure they thought we were stupid because they saw the same girls every day and they turned us back every day, but we still did it again the next day. All part of our fun at that time. Another great thing was we would bike out to Tuttington because a farmer there, Mr. Joe Lee, had Italian prisoners of war working for him. And we would go and laugh and wave. And then on the day that we heard the war in Europe, VE Day, we got our cycles and we biked out to Tuttington, wind behind us, I think, and we all clambered up onto the hedge and stood and sang, "They'll Always Be in England." I'm sure they thought we were stupid. They probably didn't understand what we were singing. But they did wave back at us and smile, and I think there were one of two of them who did either return to England or didn't go home. They found girls and settled in England. And then that evening, I worked at a shop called, I had left school by this time.
Should we say that as on the evening, if you start that as on the evening of VE Day?
On the evening of VE Day, by this time I had left school and was working in Henry Page's supply stores on the edge of the marketplace. Everybody, absolutely everybody, piled into church. And then when the service of Thanksgiving was over, we came out and we had this impromptu dance on the marketplace. And because we were really footloose and fancy free that night, there was no parents saying you can't do this or you can't do that. Everybody was so happy. Drink was flowing. The elder ones were getting quite happy. Coincidentally, there was a fair on the Bucklands, and so people were literally going back and forth from the Bucklands to the marketplace. As the evening wore on, the air was absolutely electric in the market. And people who I'd been frightened to hardly say hello to because they were the elders of the town were all just hugging and kissing and dancing. And it is something I shall always remember.
That's super. That's super. Again. Yep. Okay, off you go then.
During the war years, as you have heard others say, we were surrounded by troops, Air Force, evacuees, but everybody's door was open. Every home was a free house for soldiers and airmen to go into, have a cup of tea, write letters home, just relax. And we have very many happy days and photographs of those times. And I still keep in touch with a young airman who used to come to my home, or my parents' home, regularly. He now lives in Australia, and we write. And it was just such a wonderful time, and everybody was so loving and giving to everyone. You could never do enough for each other.
No problem at all. Yeah, all right. Well, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, yep. Okay. Well, my first memories of the war was, in fact, the siren being sounded for the first time. They sounded an air raid alarm, and everybody in our road went out in the road to have a look, expecting to see probably many German aircraft, but in fact there was nothing. And a few minutes later, they sounded the all clear. We were to learn, in fact, that all they were doing was testing the sirens. There were soldiers all around the place. There did seem to be, at the time, they were billeted in the drill hall. They were also billeted with families around the town. My own family, I seem to remember having 3 at one time, which was quite a lot in a small cottage. Then I remember at one point word got that there were planes at Aylsham, and my mother with myself and my then baby brother and the lady next door with her boys, we all walked to Aylsham, and on approaching the airfield I can remember running across the road, climbing up the fence, and standing right on the edge of the grass was a Blenheim bomber, which was one of the first aircraft, I believe, to be there. Now, by today's standards, that's not a very big aircraft, but to a child with 2 really quite large radial engines, I stood in awe, really, looking at this thing, which probably is the first aeroplane I'd actually seen. Another thing seemed to have stuck in my mind through the war was there was always long queues everywhere. There was queues at the cinema, there was queues at the fish and chip shop, and there was queues at the British restaurant. And one day I remember waiting in a queue near the cinema, and we spied what appeared to be some aircraft on a trailer coming up from Penfold Street. Well, we all ran to have a look to find that these were made from wooden canvas. And they were, in fact, decoys which were used virtually, we thought, to fool any reconnaissance or intelligence that was fed back to Germany, to give them an idea that we'd got a lot more planes than we had. And I think it actually worked. I'll just stop it there, can I? Right,
Yeah,
let's have another. Okay.
You said how old you were when the Blenheims were there. You were about 6, weren't you?
That's all right.
You walked to Oldham
Yeah.
at 6 years old.
But people knew that an airfield was being built at Oldham.
That's right.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was specially
Yeah,
built for the war and
They
so
pulled
on.
houses down and all sorts then, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Because they had one crash there just before the war, didn't they, John?
Yeah.
Didn't that hit some houses or something up there?
Yeah. All right, we'll pick up on that.
Okay.
Off we go then.
Yeah,
Yep,
okay. There was quite a lot of entertainment in the town. Quite a lot went on in the town hall. There was quite a few concerts, and indeed lots of the servicemen used to take part in these concerts, and indeed there were very many talented people sang and played instruments, and I'm sure they probably remember that if they're still around. One event that took place was a Wings for Victory week, and one of the things that you could do was have a ride on a Bren gun carrier. Now this was a tracked vehicle which in fact was like a mini tank. I think you paid 6pence and you got a savings stamp and you had a ride on the Bren gun carrier. They also had outside the post office a very large rack, and fitted to this was actually bomb racks which simulated an aircraft, which was loaded with small dummy bombs, and you paid your money and pulled a switch and dropped the bomb. But consequently, the more money you paid, the more bombs you dropped. Right. Stop.
Can you
Yeah.
just say
Yeah.
what was a Wings for Victory event?
Yeah.
Sort of in general terms.
Yes, yeah, people perhaps wouldn't know it, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, perhaps we'll come back to that.
That's all right. I'll add that on because that's right on the right on that. Yeah. This Wings for Victory week was basically to raise money, as I think they used to do in many small towns, to buy a Spitfire. And I'm sure this was always very well supported, and I'm sure they got a lot of money through these events. Another event, if you like, that happened, and so lots of many, it was a subject of much discussion, was when a German aircraft came over the town, and I can remember seeing it on my way home from school. What was so unusual was that it was very low, and looking up, it's just in total disbelief that this aircraft had black crosses on it. Now, I believe that this aircraft actually opened fire on parts of the town, and I'm not really sure exactly what happened after that. The airmen and the soldiers, and indeed a lot of American servicemen who had arrived, were still around the town virtually till the very end of the war, and indeed a short time after it had finished, after VE Day.
Have you got anything on VE? Where were you on VE Day itself?
I just remember what Dean's already said, that she's all about the celebrations, Market Square and stuff, on VE Day.
He was too young to get involved.
Well, I think everybody kind of hung around and went, but I mean, yeah, bearing in mind, I really weren't the age when I was running around after girls then. Almost, but not quite. So,
yeah.
no, I mean, generally VE Day celebrations were basically the same all over. You know,
Well,
they all
wasn't here
had.
then, so-
No, they all had their separate
Everybody
things.
wore
And
little bits of red, white and blue.
yeah,
Sold
that's
out of
right.
Red, white
Yeah.
and blue,
yeah,
pages with
that's
the name.
right.
You never actually said where you were when the plane came over, because you were at the top of Sandy Lane, weren't you, going home to after school?
Well, I said coming home from school there.
Yeah, that'd be all right. We'll work that in. And, wait, have you got sort of in mind where you're going to start and so on?
Sunday the 3rd of September 39, I think.
Right, off we go.
Very much a picture in my mind is Sunday the 3rd of September 1939. It was during morning service in Aylsham Church that I was a choir boy at the time. Well, a young man at any rate, at the age of 17. Tuddy, we knew him, Arnold Tuddenham, who was the verger, handed a note to Charles Martin, the vicar, to the effect that, as he then announced, we were at war with Germany. And we all know Chamberlain's words about there having been no reply to the ultimatum to Adolf Hitler. What happened after that? I think probably a period of silence, and then that's all I remember of that particular occasion. When war was declared soon after, in the local paper, which was probably the Eastern Daily Press, there was an illustration of how to construct a dugout. No Anderson shelters in those days, and certainly the Morrison shelter, the tabletop, came in very much later. When I came home on army leave, actually I went under the table. That's where my parents used to sleep, and I joined them under the table actually in the living room where we were then living when I was army leave. So I decided to build this shelter in the garden where we were in Yaxley's Lane, Aylsham. It consisted of digging quite a deep hole and then going along to the undertakers, actually, duckers, and you could buy, or have pretty well given, I think, slabs, which were the rounded parts of the timber, and they made very good sides for the dugout, which was conducted and which was arranged. It was on a slope, sloping sides, and after you've put that in and to hold back the soil on the slope, then went over corrugated iron, again, which I obtained same place, Duckers, and over the top of that over several feet of earth, as much as you could. I constructed steps leading down into it, and my father, who'd been in the Royal Navy, made hammocks for myself and anybody else to be in the above, and my father and mother were underneath. One night I particularly remember was when the siren had gone, that there was an air raid, and as we were walking down the garden path, looking across towards Norwich, it was obvious the sky lit up, you could see. And I think the very words that my father used were, "Norwich is getting it tonight." And that was the case. It was 1942, the time of the air raid. So we had been using the air raid shelter. Whenever there was an air raid warning, we'd been using that to going down there. At that time, 1942, I had taken a temporary job in Norwich, and I used to cycle backwards and forwards to Norwich. I'd taken this temporary job at the City Hall, and I can still again picture going along Brigg Street, Rampant Horse Street, and having to lift my bike over all the pipes and they'd been left there after the firefighting, and I understand the Aylsham Fire Brigade was among several brigades that were called out that particular night. So that's another memory there of 1942, the air raids on Norwich. Coming back to Aylsham, thinking of Aylsham, of course, I was very much working backwards and forwards, driving backwards and forwards to Norwich. Must have been in the blackout, and of course the lights on the bicycle were shaded. There was like a shutter across the lights, as there were also with the cars. There were the shutters over the cars. Blackouts certainly, and things like that. Can I stop at that point?
Yep. In Norwich.
I was in the water rate department, and we were dealing with bombed out properties very, very much, because every time there was
let's just go back to the beginning, start that.
Yes.
Mind, yeah.
Yes.
Yes, that's it. You were dealing with. You were in the water.
Yes. In the my job at the City Hall was as I was a clerk in the water department at the City Hall, and certainly the bombing in Norwich affected us a very great deal, because a lot of water rates, of course, were no longer being charged on properties that had been bombed. Dereham Road was particularly very badly hit, and Dereham Road, certainly a lot of places were completely demolished there. So that was wartime. But as I said, I was cycling backwards and forwards to Norwich. Another thing too, our work was being disturbed so much, and having to go down into the basement, that it was decided to put a stop to the loss of time. We were carrying our books down, our rating books, but as a result, there would be someone on fire watching on the City Hall, and a spotter. And there was a crash warning, and when the crash warning gave on the not the siren, but sort of a tannoy, I suppose, you would then rush downstairs. I was on fire watching on the first night, not the first night of the Blitz, but on the first Blitz. I'd been on fire watching the night before. On the second Blitz, I was on fire watching the night after. And that's when I saw all these hose pipes and that left around.
Talking about Aylsham. in between? No, that must have been John just talking about
Yes,
his in Norwich.
yes. Crash one.
Well, if we go into the fire
Yes.
engine.
Yes. What was the other?
And then the town hall, you were talking about the town hall.
Town hall.
Dances and the old deal floor. And
Right.
the
Yeah.
assembly rooms at the Black Boys.
Right. Okay. Ready?
Yep.
Yep.
All right.
So it was the firefighting in Norwich, as I say, with Aylsham Fire Brigade taking part. We had, as to say, the Aylsham Fire Brigade had been upgraded, and I knew a lot about this because I was working for the clerk to Aylsham Parish Council at the time, and the fire watching, that's under the lighting watching committee, came under the parish council, and all expenses at fires were paid through the parish council. The upgrading of the Merryweather engine took place, and a fire tender replaced the former Merryweather engine. The old machine had leather hoses, and leather hose had also screw couplings instead of instantaneous couplings, which came later. So it was a very much out-of-date machine. There is still a Merryweather engine actually at Gresson Hall. Another thing to remember is during the war years there was the town hall where dances were held. The floor was a deal floor, and it was there were knots in it, cracks in the floor and so on. My wife in particular can remember on one occasion when her shoe came off during a dance, because my wife was living here during the war years, and she then went on hopping around, doing a hop, while her shoe was wedged in this floor. The floor was replaced after the war at a cost of £3,000, and the chairman at the time, which was Dr. Holman, had his knuckles rapped because he didn't go out to tender. But it's the same floor, a wonderful floor, that was built. Another floor that was laid. Another remembrance is about the assembly rooms at the Black Boys. The assembly room was there, and Lord Nelson was supposed to have been one who danced there. Another point of interest this year, 200 years of anniversary. And dances were certainly held in the assembly rooms, which were at the back of the Black Boys. Aylsham Band used to rehearse there as well, and it was used quite a lot. There was also the Bank Barn, another place where certainly the Aylsham players used to rehearse there, one of the several places they rehearsed after the war and even before the war. So those places to remember were which are very much in use during the war.
So were you still at school then at the beginning of the war?
As regards the beginning of the war, I was 17 years old. I had already left school. I was 17. Right. Yeah. I had left school in 1936, so that was 2 years before. One point which I think is worth mentioning is that a great pal of mine, Frank Broom, actually is standing beside me, a photograph there in the churchyard, and this was about 1930, 35, 36, whatever, and he was shot down in a plane over Germany during the war, Frank Broom. He was a rear gunner. As soon as I saw him on leave wearing the insignia of a rear gunner, I had my fears about him. But I survived, and of course that was 1938, but here I am at the age of 83, survived all those years.
Now, what happens at that point when your call-up papers come? Did you know your call-up papers would come? Tell me about this sort of experience of the call-up.
Yeah. I had put down to go into the teleprinter operator section as a teleprinter operator. Being a touch typist, I was advised by a relative that why don't you put yourself down as a teleop? It delayed my call-up, I don't know why, but although I registered with the 19-year-olds, I was not called up until 1943. But then things happened very quickly. Because 1943, when I received my call-up papers, I was relieved. I was relieved actually, because there I was. I mean, 19 years old, because registered with the first batch of 19-year-olds when registration came down to that age. And there I had registered and of course was still waiting for call-up. I was of the age of 20 when I was called up in 1943. In the June, I was called up, April, May, whatever. In the June, on Derby Day, June, Ocean Swell won the Derby when our troopship set sail for the Far East. It took us 2 months to go to the Far East, actually.
And which regiment?
I was in. I was in 117 Teleop section, attached to 221 Group RAF at Imphal, which is about 80 miles south of Kohima, where the Battle of Kohima was taking place, and the road, the Manipo road, was cut off, and we ourselves actually were supplied by air, and we were doing signals actually for. Well, mainly for Wingate long-range penetration in Burma. That was our function.
Now, when it came to call up in a town like Aylsham, were you able to choose whether you wanted to go into the Army, the Air Force or the Navy?
Yeah.
If you turn that back round into a sentence.
Where did you go to call up? Where did you go to register?
Well, when I registered with when registration came down to the age of 19, and I had to register, I was then asked which service I wanted to go into, and I said I wanted to go into Royal Signals, formerly the Royal Corps of Signals, later called the Royal Signals, as a teleprinter operator. And even at Osset, where we had our initial, when I was first called up, went by train from the M&GN, that was the lower station at Aylsham, went by train first to Wakefield, and then picked up by a lorry, went on to Osset, and then we were in an old mill, and it was there you had your basic training, and salt courses and all the rest of it. And that then, although there were tests going on, I was still designated for going into Royal Signals as a teleprinter operator.
And what was the feeling amongst the younger people in Aylsham? Was there a general feeling that everybody wanted to get going and contribute?
In Aylsham there was very much the feeling right from the start of the war. Quite a number of men had volunteered, and certainly those who had been at school with me, a number of them volunteered or were of course of the age for being called up, and they were actually called up into the forces. But you could actually elect which service you wanted to go into. As a matter of fact, when I was at the City Hall, I was getting so fed up with waiting, I actually went along, when you think how keen you were, went along to the recruiting office and said, I want to volunteer for the RAF. And the next question, well, what have you've registered, what have you put down for? I said, as a telewop in the Royal Signals, sorry, goodbye. I then tried another time, even for the Royal Navy. So keen as mustard, but that was the situation. On that Sunday morning.
Just go for that.
Yeah. On that Sunday morning, 3rd of September 1939, there was certainly a feeling of relief. We'd had the crisis of 1938, a very unfinished story in a way, and there was quite an amount of relief. Well, at least that we know where we are, and also I would say, even for myself at the age of 17, a certain amount of oh yes, we can now be involved ourselves. We'd heard stories from our teachers, for example, John Barber, school teacher who had been in the First World War. We'd heard from my father, and I had Royal Navy, speaking about places in the Persian Gulf and so on, where he'd been, and now we ourselves would be going into uniform in the army. There was a certain amount of excitement. Am I still connected?
Yeah, still there.
The bicycle I used to ride backwards and forwards to Norwich was a BSA, the first sports model they ever brought out. Cost £6.19 and sixpence. I couldn't afford a Sunbeam, which would have been over £7. And it was on that bicycle that I used to ride backwards and forwards to Norwich. and I had a cyclometer on it until the cyclometer actually reached its maximum and was taken off. And that same bicycle I still use and have used all these years. I wouldn't part it for the world. You can have all the 15 gear bikes you like, but my 3-speed gear had to be changed to a Sturmey Archer when the BSA 3-speed went wrong, but otherwise that same bicycle is one I now use. And when I write about Aylsham, it's my logo is a chap, a silhouette on a bike.
Well, I left school in 1939, July, and I went to work at the manor, where I was accredited poultry breeding station then, and there was 5 of us worked there. A conscientious objector who left just before, or just after the war started, and I worked there for 5 or 6 years. And they had 4 maids at that time, besides the people who worked there. But then the Norfolks were stationed in Aylsham for a while, and they were built round the town, and one house had 13, and they used to have to feed them in that days because they hadn't got any facilities at the drill hall to feed them. But they kicked them out there, where they had ordinary civil gas masks. They used to write all over them, we're at this house. They said they were the Hungry 13, and they drawed pots and jam and all that. They lived on wasp jam, they said, but the army took them away later on, and they were built around the town. My father was on a paper round one Sunday morning, and he said they were looking for billets, and he said, well, I'll have that man with me, he said. He said, his cousin he hadn't seen for years, and he lived with us quite a while. But anyway, it wasn't long before the Essex Regiment came, and they were there quite a while. But they had a massive concert band, brilliant, absolutely brilliant they were. And because I used to get free tickets in, knowing the soldiers who lived and the batmen lived at the manor, and the officers lived at the manor. But the band was stationed at Collegiate House in Hungot Street. But then they were there for about couple of years, I should think. I can't say exactly how long they were there. And then they had the Welsh come there. Can I go back to Essex? Sorry.
Absolutely. Let's not really do anything.
They used to run boxing booths and all sorts.
Let's just say, can you start off by saying, rather than saying they, just say the Essex used to.
Pardon?
Just instead of saying they, just say the Essex Regiment.
Yeah, yes. The Essex Regiment used to put on concerts in the town hall where I used to get free tickets. But they also ran some boxing booths or boxing contests in the town hall. I remember some of them from Stalham and all round there coming to these boxing booths. Anyway, they wasn't there too long before the Welsh came, but they didn't. I mean, they only just lived there, and they were stationed at the Bushy down the Cromer Road as well.
What were all these soldiers supposed to be doing all this while?
Well, I don't know. They had a searchlight at the back of the school. What is the school now? The school. They had a searchlight there, which the Germans dropped a screaming bomb to them. And what else? We were down feeding the poultry one day, and this aircraft came over, and I said, "Oh, Billy Yaxley, who worked with me," and I say, "Look there, Julie, there's a bomb there, a bomber." And "God," he said, "boy," he said, "that's a rumbling." And they were firing at it from the coach, from camp by the station, but they never hit it. But they went across the fields and shot at the soldiers playing football on the wreck. And then I heard that had hit Morris Green in the marketplace. He was then going back to work at Page's. All right there? Now what can I tell you? Sorry.
Take your time, Russell. You know lots of time.
Yeah, it's all right. Plenty of time, but yeah.
The Italian prisoners of war?
Pardon?
You said the Italian prisoners of war?
Oh yeah, they had the Welsh come there later on, and then we went. I used to go down to Spa Farm quite a lot because my parents worked there, and then the Italians were draining the meadows at that time. The Italian prisoners. Okay.
Yep.
Did you say about the White House? Did you say about them?
Yeah.
Yep.
Then, all right.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I go?
I'm just trying to think. So we think we've covered most things on the list there.
Yes,
Just
you
think
said about the
So,
113.
so were you? So you weren't called up. Tell us.
I was then got to say.
Yeah.
Then I had to go and register in 1943 to see what service I'd go in, and I said, "What do you go in?" I said, "I don't mind what I go in." But then I got called up into the coal mines. I went January the 13th, 1944, to Yorkshire, where I stayed for 4 years before I came home to Norfolk. Okay?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's just we want to work out to say something like the chaps who had to go to the coal mines were called Bevan boys. And
That's
why-
right. Yes.
When
Yeah.
if you say
Yeah.
something.
Oh, yeah.
So just say
Yes,
why you had to go.
I was called into the coal mines with the Bevan scheme, Bevan boys. They'd sent the miners into the coal mine, into the army and air force, whatever, and they was short of workers in the coal mines, so they called us up into the coal mines. I went up to Yorkshire, and there I stayed for 4 years.
You never said about the number. It depended on your number,
Pardon?
didn't it? It depended on what number you were, didn't it? If you were in mine.
Oh yes, that came out on your national insurance number, 0 or 9, and I had both them at that time. So I had no choice really.
Let's just structure that a little bit and say, if your national insurance number was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you come out, if your national insurance number ended with 0 or 9, you were called into the coal mines, and I had both of them at that time, so I had no choice. Nobody had a choice as regards calling into the coal mines.
What did you feel about that?
What did I think about it? Well, I mean, I adapted to it like a duck in water, but some people didn't really, approve of it anyway. But I didn't mind it one little bit, really.
You got the name of the colliery you went to.
Pardon?
Which colliery?
Oh, I was at Silverwood Colliery in South Yorkshire. We trained at Askin Main Colliery near Doncaster, and then we were distributed out from there. And I went to Rotherham, and they sent them all over the country. Not just in Yorkshire, they went all over Mansfield and round. We have a reunion every year now, yeah. Okay?
This medal.
Yep, just hold you.
Oh, yeah. That's. I went back and they get you put in the other way. I went back and they gave me that. I don't know if you'd see that, will you?
Yeah, just hold that up. You see, and just say this is.
Will you?
Yeah, just go ahead and say this is.
Pardon?
Just go ahead and say something like this is my.
Yeah. Oh, I went back a few years later and they gave me this, where they broke the record for output.
So if you can say something like this is a medal.
Yeah, this is a medal which I distributed. And there was 11 of them killed then.
Did you have a miner's lamp on?
Yes, yeah. I had one of them, but I also had a bottle lamp. We used to hang it on your belt. They weighed £7. They used to crash against your knees when you were carrying anything.
What about, because were you in digs, obviously?
Yes,
Were you in
yes.
sort of private digs, were you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Not in sort of huts?
No, I wasn't in a hostel. I believe Horace Baker was in.
Children of them.
I believe Horace Baker was in a hostel. Pontefract, that was, yeah.
But you were in sort of built with the people?
Yes, yeah, with different people, yeah. Yeah.
What about
Thank you.
baths or showers? Did you
We had showers, that lovely.
Not the pit head, though?
Yes, yeah, we did there, yes, yeah. But a lot of them didn't, who in different places. No, I used to have to go home and bath in front of the fire and all that.
And of course, another thing too, I mean, you'd have to change your clothes pretty frequently, wouldn't you?
Well, see, what we used to do, we used to go work in our best, like what I am now, perhaps, and then you'd have your working clothes. We had lockers. You'd take these off and hang them in your locker, go through and put your old working clothes on, and then go to work, come back and do it the other when you'd hang your working clothes in the locker and come through and have a shower and go out the other side and put your best clothes on. come home.
It depended which part of the mine you were working in, whether you were just in shorts or whether you were really.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the
temperature changed so much.
First place I went to was 4 foot high, but yeah, that was really cold. Really, you got the first intake of air there, you know, and that was really cold. I mean, even everything worked with compressed air at that time. Well, I don't know, of course, but I worked with compressed air, and the engines used to freeze up. Conveyor belt used to freeze up with the cold air. When they used to have to knock them, get them going again, you know.
Were there extractor fans taking out some of the settling of the dust?
Not where we were. No. No. See, they had two shafts, an intake and an outlet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But I tell you, where I was first was 4 foot high. That was really cold. I was there for about a couple of years. Then we moved on to 7 foot. But that was hot. I used to work in shorts and that then. Just nothing. And used to have long socks, cut the feet off, and pull them over the top of your boots to keep the dust out. I mean, every 5 minutes you'd be emptying your boots. And they used to throw stone dust about to keep the heat down. That sort of creamy coloured dust. And they used to throw it all on the walls and on the floor and everywhere, you know, to keep the heat down. And we had two gangways, and in where the conveyor belt come out, brought the coal out. You'd have one along the main one where the collie was filling onto it, and the other end used to take supplies and one thing another that way. The coal come out one side and the supplies in the other. Well, I was a supply lad. I used to carry 7 foot steel and props, lids and bars and all that, you know, to prop the roof up. Sometimes you would have a little rumble and they'd run out up the gangways onto the main traffic area, you know, yeah. Everything worked with compressed air, bar the main haulage. That was an engine in pit bottom. When they used to hook a chain round, there was a lot of people got their fingers crushed, and then you used to hook it round 2 or 3 times, then hook the chain in, which pulled, and you had one on the back as well to stop them running away. And when they got near pit bottom, which was, I mean, we used to walk, quarter an hour, 10 minutes first, and get on his train and ride. 20 minutes on a train, on a low, like, you know, platform seats. Used to ride, and then we used to have a 5 minutes walk the other end when we got off. So you know that was a good way.